Blessings, everybody. Welcome back to the channel. I'm Dane. I hope you're doing well wherever you may find yourselves. I hope you're still enjoying this holiday season. Today's video is, I think, a fun exercise. I've been stewing over this one for quite a while. And that is, I'm going to present with you today a look at many of the most important subgenres within rock and roll and talk about what I think, just a subjective opinion, who are the big four of each of those subgenres within rock, and then who is the band on the outside looking in that could make up what we would call the big five, and might be close, not necessarily always, a band that could replace one of the big four, perhaps. And keep in mind, there's going to be some overlapping, and in addition, another parameter would be that not all of these are subgenres per se, but movements, if you will. Okay, so let's get started. The first is the British Invasion. I don't have anything in a chronologically timeline kind of thing, so I just, as my thoughts came to me, and I started to put down why they belong here, that kind of thing. So, British Invasion, I think most people would agree that the big four of the British Invasion are the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, the Who, and the Kinks. Now, I have three bands on the outside looking in, and I'm going to pick one of them. We have the Yardbirds, the Pretty Things, and the Small Faces. I love all three of these bands. The cliched and expected response would be the Yardbirds, and I'm very close to wanting to put them in, as on the outside, the closest to being a part of the big four. But I have to go with the Pretty Things because I listen to the Pretty Things much more than I do Yardbirds. Now, if I was going to concede, then I would put the Yardbirds in. But from my opinion, in my opinion only, I got to put the Pretty Things in from a biased point of view or because I like the Pretty Things more than the Yardbirds. All right, next is proto-metal. Most people would agree, I'm not the first person to say this, that the big four of proto-metal are Black Sabbath, Led Zeppelin, Deep Purple, and Uriah Heep. On the outside looking in are Blue Cheer, Jimi Hendrix Experience, Cream, and Grand Funk Railroad, or Grand Funk. And of those four, the two that I would say are more worthy of being the fifth on the outside looking in is Cream and Jimi Hendrix. But I think Jimi Hendrix is more influential and inspirational for so many other bands and people and fans and critics to come that I'm going to put Jimi Hendrix in as part of the big five, or the band on the outside looking in. And let's face it, as a guitar player, influenced so many other metal bands and other rock bands and hard rock and blues-based type guitar players and bands in general. So Jimi Hendrix. New wave of British heavy metal, a movement, not a genre or subgenre. I'm going to put in Iron Maiden, Saxon, Venom, and Tigers of Pantang. On the outside looking in, Diamond Head, Tokyo Blade, and Raven. Now let me explain my choice for Iron Maiden and the others. Iron Maiden is a given. Competing with Judas Priest as a twin guitar band. Perhaps more on that later. Hint, hint. You have such an amazing vocalist in Bruce Dickinson, but before he was in the band, you have such an amazing vocalist in Paul Di'Anno. Very different from Bruce, but Paul could sing in a punk metal style vein, but he could also sing soft-spoken and melodic and certain songs. Remember Tomorrow is an example. So yeah, I have to include Iron Maiden here. Just an influential band on so many bands to follow, and even influential on their own contemporaries as well. Have to include Saxon for that motorcycle type metal, the denim and leather, not just the song, but the look and the shtick and the feel and the tone and the character of what they were doing. I've heard someone say that Saxon makes them think as if Status Quo and Judas Priest had a baby. It's interesting. Next is Venom, proto-black metal, proto-death metal, if not those in its own right. A trio, if you will. Some punk rock, even dare I say Motorhead-esque qualities at times. Tigers of Pantang, because of John Sykes, as brief as the stint was in the band. Those first 4 albums, I think, are, as much as I like Diamond Head and Tokyo Blade and Raven, I love the first 4 albums of Tigers much more than I do Diamond Head. Diamond Head's more about the hits for me, but they do have some good deep cuts as well. Tokyo Blade is kind of a twin brother to Diamond Head and Tigers. And Raven is in the run, but I'm gonna make my choice in a minute. Raven influenced the new wave of British heavy metal, if not in the new wave of British heavy metal themselves, depending on who you talk to, inspiring bands like Metallica, Megadeth, etc. I'm gonna go with Diamond Head because of the hits and how influential they are. So Diamond Head is number 5. Next is punk. I'm not a big punk fan, but I'm gonna choose the big 4, the bands who were part of the Anarchy in the UK tour in the late 70s. The Clash, the Sex Pistols, the Ramones, and the Damned. Unfortunately, the Damned got kicked off of that tour, if you know that story. And on the outside looking in, I only have one, and it's going to be the Buzzcocks because they're very similar to the Sex Pistols, similar style vocals. Again, I'm not a big fan of these bands, really, with the exception of the Damned. I love the Damned, but for those of you who are punk fans, I'm sure you would agree that, or most of you would agree that the big 4 are the Clash, the Sex Pistols, the Ramones, and the Damned. If you put a gun to my head, I would choose, because again, I'm not a big punk person, I would listen to the Buzzcocks more than I would the Clash. Maybe they should be part of the big 4. Anyway, thrash metal. You know what the big 4 are: Metallica, Megadeth, Anthrax, and Slayer. Who's on the outside looking in? There are quite a few to choose from. You could say Exodus. Problem with Exodus, I only like the first 2 albums. I wouldn't include them in the running. The 2 that come to mind the most would be Testament and, well, Testament would be the big one to consider. Others would be, the band that I'm trying to think of. Sodom, the German band Destruction, and there's another big, player that I'm missing that's outside of the big 4, alongside with Sodom. But here's my choice. And it's just because of a bias. I'm picking Nuclear Assault. I took a shining to them almost immediately with the album Game Over, and those first 4 or 5 albums, first 4 albums, it's where it's at. I think Nuclear Assault, deservedly so, belongs very close. The other band I was thinking of perhaps was Overkill, and I'm not a big fan of them. They're so silly at times, but I do respect the craft that they have, but they're just so silly sometimes, as Anthrax can be. But I think Overkill is much more sillier than Anthrax. Nuclear Assault, number 5. Clear choice for me, Nuclear Assault, as part of the big 5 of thrash metal. I know for some of you that's blasphemous. Glam rock: T-Rex, Sweet, Slade, Mott the Hoople. T-Rex is an obvious choice. I love T-Rex, the earlier stuff. The folky stuff is okay. What I meant to say was the earlier stuff before you get into the Blue-Eyed Soul period. Everything from Electric Warrior and Slider, those are my 2 favorite, through and including Tank and or Futuristic Dragon. What a great little run there by T-Rex. Sweet, one of my favorite bands, top 10 bands of all time. You would not have Sweet, I don't think, if it were not for Slade. But we'll get to Slade in a minute. Sweet's one of my favorite bands because Brian Connolly's voice, that raspiness, and yet it's heavy at times, and yet it just carries a certain energy that is almost impossible to describe. There's some really heavy stuff there, and I do like the bubblegum stuff, going back to my childhood when I used to go skating, and you listen to Sweet, and the Archies and even some early Paul McCartney has that glam feel to it because of the vocals. And later on you have Jellyfish, Cheap Trick. You would not have Cheap Trick if it were not for Sweet and Slade, I think especially Sweet. And I love early Cheap Trick. Bay City Rollers is the band that I was thinking of, very similar to Sweet, but Sweet's heavier, much heavier at times than Bay City Rollers ever were. And Mott the Hoople is not from their whole perspective or discography, Mott the Hoople is only a glam band in the last part of their short run as a band, but I have to include them here. And then on the outside looking in is a clear winner, and that is New York Dolls. As silly as the second album could be, but I do like it. The first album, even though they don't have a huge discography, only really 2 albums, if you talk about the comeback and that kind of thing with the Reformation, the reunion, it's okay stuff, but New York Dolls is a clear winner for me when it comes to glam. All right, next, I'm taking this one out because I just realized that I just made a mistake. All right, twin guitar bands. So this is just bands who have in common twin guitar metal bands. So here we go. Judas Priest, Iron Maiden, Scorpions. I take that back, not metal, because Thin Lizzy is not a metal band, except for their last album. So twin guitar bands, twin guitar rock bands. Judas Priest, Iron Maiden, Scorpions, and Thin Lizzy are the big 4 for me. What can you say about KK Downing, Glenn Tipton? Of course, Iron Maiden has 3 guitarists at one point, but if you talk about their best part of the discography with Adrian Smith, and now I'm forgetting the other guitarists. Sorry about that, brain bubble and all. The Scorpions with Matthias Jabs and Rudolf Schenker, and of course Thin Lizzy with your 2 guitarists there. And on the outside looking in, I have Queensryche. In fact, I listen to Queensryche more than Thin Lizzy. Queensryche I like better than Thin Lizzy, but I have to put Queensryche on the outside looking in because of the legacy and the influence and how inspirational Thin Lizzy is. And as far as discography goes, and they have a better discography than Queensryche, although I like, as I said, I like Queensryche better than Thin Lizzy because of the heaviness and the wonderful guitar work from both of the boys in the band. And again, I'm sorry, I'm drawing a blank on that today. Twin guitar, you on the outside looking in, you could also include, some of you would include Wishbone Ash. I'm not the biggest Wishbone Ash, but I have to recognize them for being so influential on the whole twin guitar thing. So anyway, twin guitar, Judas Priest, Iron Maiden, Scorpions, and Thin Lizzy. When I was in high school, Judas Priest, Iron Maiden, and Scorpions were the big 3 for me, and later on came Queensryche and Thin Lizzy, from my childhood. So, all right, next is power metal. Queensryche, Fate's Warning, Halloween, and Gamma Ray. Now, get to who's the 5th on the outside looking in. It's not my idea, but I agree that Gamma Ray, if not the band who created power metal, definitely one of the first bands to, influence and create. They were a part of the creation, if you will, co-writing or coming up with the concept of power metal. Have to give credit where credit is due. I don't listen to Gamma Ray a lot, but when I do, boy, I'm really like, wow, this is some pretty good stuff. And then for whatever reason, I just don't think about them for a while, and that's a problem. I need to get back and listen to them more, but I do like Gamma Ray. All right, on the outside looking in is Iced Earth, kind of stealing their mascot from Iron Maiden a little bit. You have this mummified Egyptian-looking creature, perhaps, stealing it from Iron Maiden because it has the Power Slave look to it. But that aside, great vocalist, They have many vocalists, including Tim Ripper Owens at one point, but the two original vocalists, I think, are where it's at. You have the Dark Saga and some wonderful stuff there. So Iced Earth, on the outside looking in. I would say some of you would argue Blind Guardian and Primal Fear. You would be right. Shock rock, Kiss, Alice Cooper, Christian Death, and the Plasmatics. On the outside looking in is Gwar and Twisted Sister. I cannot take Gwar all that seriously. And I'm not the biggest fan of Twisted Sister anymore. It was a band I really liked in high school. But I would concede that I would argue my opinion would be that Twisted Sister belongs in the 5th spot as a band on the outside looking in. Of course, shock rock perhaps began with Arthur Brown and then Alice Cooper, huge influence and co-creator, you could argue, of shock rock. Kiss is where it really took off, and then you get the kind of shock rock / with Wendy O. Williams breaking televisions and wearing like a headband that has like a rhinoceros hook to it or horn to it, right? Really cool stuff. Very theatrical like Kiss, but in a different sense. Very early Who with the breaking of gear and that kind of thing. And the music's good. I like the Plasmatics, heavy punk, heavy hard rock meets punk kind of a thing. And Christian Death, hard to describe band, whether you're talking about the original singer or the follow-up singer. Much in their catalog is quite good. There's some stinker stuff there, but that's to be expected with any band or most bands. If you're not familiar with Christian Death, check them out. They're a different blend of shock rock, unlike Kiss, Alice Cooper, and Plasmatics. Hard to describe, but has some goth elements. Art rock, art punk is a better way to describe it, but I'm putting them here because of that shock value they had on stage from stories I've heard. All right, next is hair metal. Now, keep in mind, some of these bands I'm not the biggest fan of their entire discographies, but I think many of you would agree that the big four of hair metal are Motley Crue, Rat, Dokken, and Cinderella. Of those four, my two favorite are Dokken and Cinderella. Those first two Cinderella albums are legendary. Dokken's first four are amazing. Rat's first album and that EP are a wonderful. Motley Crue's first two albums are wonderful. On the outside looking in, Stryper, Hanoi Rocks, Skid Row, and Poison. The problem with Hanoi Rocks is that they're not just a hair metal. They're the elements of punk and other things going on, so I would exclude them. Stryper, they're a specific blend of hair metal because of the Christian metal. That would be a different genre, I guess, or subgenre. Skid Row or Poison. Probably the cliche choice for many of you would be put Poison in there because of that first album. But Skid Row has 3 really good albums. Poison only has really 1. I'm not a big Poison fan at all. I would put Skid Row as the 5th one on the outside looking in. Next, we come to grunge. Of course, most people would argue that the big four are Nirvana, Soundgarden, Alice in Chains, and Pearl Jam. I would agree with that. I'm putting them there as the big four. On the outside looking in, and this is kind of a tough one, you have Mudhoney, Green River, Mother Love Bone, Tad, and Screaming Trees. Now, you have Mark Arn in both Mudhoney and Green River. The problem with Green River is you don't have much of a discography. It's too short. Mudhoney, only like 2 or 3 albums. I do like them. Mother Love Bone doesn't fit at all with any of these grunge bands. Maybe Alice in Chains' first album to a little degree because that first facelift, is a little hair metal-y. Tad is kind of way on the outside looking in, so I'm not going to include them, although I do like them. They're just a consideration. Screaming Trees is definitely worthwhile to be in this list, but I have to go with my gut, and I'm picking Mudhoney. Yeah. All right. Southern Rock. Lynyrd Skynyrd, Molly Hatchet, The Outlaws, Allman Brothers. On the outside looking in, ZZ Top, Government Mule, Drive-By Truckers. There are a lot here. Marshall Tucker Band, Ozark Mountain Daredevils, or is it Devils? Black Oak, Arkansas, Blackfoot, Rossington Collins Band, Jim Dandy. Well, Jim Dandy's the spinoff from Black Oak, Arkansas. Excuse me. So my gut tells me to go with Government Mule. A little bit later, or a lot later. Very similar to Allman Brothers. So I'm gonna pick. ZZ Top gets too commercial later on. There's kind of a return to form, but they're, even with their much bluesier stuff from the get-go, it's still very commercial. And so is Skinner and Hatchet, but for whatever reason, I as much as I like early ZZ Top, I take much more shine to Lynyrd Skynyrd and Molly Hatchet and the Outlaws and Allman Brothers. And I just think from an overall ethos point of view that the Government Mule band, the Government Mule fits in much nicer. They're a lot closer in sound to those. Well, I think to the Outlaws and Allman Brothers, and Lynyrd Skynyrd and Molly Hatchet are kind of a twin paired similarity kind of a thing, if that makes sense. Okay. Instrumental guitarist. The big four, you know who they are: Steve Vai, Eric Johnson, Joe Satriani, and Yngwie Malmsteen. Although Malmsteen, I don't think, has ever toured with those other three gentlemen who have, and I called it the tour something. On the outside looking in, Vinnie Moore, Jason Becker, Marty Friedman, Tony McAlpine, and Paul Gilbert, all great guitarists. And David T. Chastain would be included in there. But of those, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, the two closest to be the fifth, to make up the big five, would be either Marty Friedman or Paul Gilbert. I want to say Friedman, but I got to go with my gut and go with Paul Gilbert. I love Marty Friedman, but there's just something about Paul Gilbert that gets me even a little bit more excited, even if we talk about his time in Racer X. So Paul Gilbert. Proto-Punk. This one was easy for me. The Stooges, the New York Dolls, MC5, and the Sonics. Sonics more of a garage band, but they definitely get my vote because of how influential they are on the Stooges, MC5, New York Dolls, etc. And you can hear it in the music. On the outside looking in, the Seeds or the Dictators is the only two bands I have written here. I'm just going to go with the Seeds. I think they're dynamite, proto-punk wise. All right, let's talk about groove metal. Pantera, Down, Exhorder, and Corrosion of Conformity. Many of you will argue are the big four. I'm going to take Corrosion of Conformity out and put in Southern Whiskey Rebellion. 3 wonderful albums. I take a shine to them much more than Corrosion of Conformity, although I do like me some Corrosion of Conformity. But the big four for me are Pantera, Down, Exhorder, and Southern Whiskey Rebellion. And Corrosion of Conformity is the 5th band on the outside looking in. All right. They began as a punk band. Doom Stoner. My 4 favorite of all time: Electric Wizard, High on Fire, Sleep, and Uncle Acid and the Deadbeats, now known as Uncle Acid. Uncle Acid, kind of the outlier in here because they have some... The voice doesn't go with the rest of the other 3 bands, really. Although, well, I take that back. Uncle Acid vocally very... or not very similar, but a little bit similar to the vocalist of Electric Wizard. Of course, High on Fire and Sleep, you have the same guitarist, Matt Pike. Different vocalist, though. Al Cisneros is in the vocalist and bass player of Sleep. On the outside looking in, I have Caius and Cathedral. I have to pick Cathedral because I don't listen to Caius as much as I used to, and I still listen to Cathedral in the same amount that I've always have. So Cathedral, big 5. There's so many Doom Stoner bands, of course. Classic progressive rock. This was easy for me. Rush, Genesis, Yes, and King Crimson. Genesis' early run from Trespass through and including Abacab, perhaps their best run. Yes, I would say from the Yes album through and including Relayer is where it's at. King Crimson, everything from the debut through and including Red, and then there's some stuff later on when you get to the 3-drummer period, and some of the stuff from the Adrian Belew stuff I do like, but I'm not crazy about it. But I love King Crimson enough, and part of that is because of the wealth of live material that I have to include them here, and there are other reasons as well. Just an amazing band all around. And of course, Rush, my favorite progressive rock band of all time. Of course, I'm going to include them. On the outside looking in, Jethro Tull, Emerson, Lake and Palmer, Kansas, and Pink Floyd. Pink Floyd has perhaps 4 progressive rock albums: The Wall, Dark Side of the Moon, Animals, and Wish You Were Here. And then they're also psychedelic and other things, so I'm not going to include them, although I put them in consideration. Emerson, Lake and Palmer, you don't have a guitar player, really. Electric guitar, very little of that. Some acoustic, right? But essentially, Emerson is the one who takes place, because the keyboards take place of the guitarist. Jethro Tull, I respect Jethro Tull very much, but much of their stuff isn't my cup of tea. Again, I respect them, though. I got to go with Kansas, an American progressive rock band. Who knew the violin could be so endearing and charming and work well with rock music? And there are other reasons. Steve Walsh's amazing vocals, Kerry Livgren, and Rich Williams. Hey, I remember those 2 guitarists. Finally, some heavy stuff there from those boys, especially in the live stuff, too, for the show as an example. All right, so Kansas, outside looking in, part of the Big 5. Psychedelic rock. Pink Floyd, The Moody Blues, Procol Harum, and Iron Butterfly are my choices for the Big 4 of psychedelic rock. And on the outside looking in, I have Vanilla Fudge and The Doors. The Doors, I love The Doors. I'm a big fan. But not enough bass. I know people are tired of hearing that. Again, I love The Doors, not enough bass. But that's not the real reason. The real reason is because Phil Manzarek's style, which I love, doesn't fit in with the keys that you get in Floyd, Moody Blues, Procol Harum, and Butterfly. Those 4 are more similar. You could argue that Steppenwolf kind of fits in this, but they're also Deep Purple-ish and vanilla. Well, they're Vanilla Fudge-ish because of the keyboards and the synths, but not enough psychedelic there. They're more hard rock, proto-metal, They're hard to describe. They're a whole bunch of things, so I leave them out. But I do like Steppenwolf. So my Big 4: Pink Floyd, Moody Blues, Procol Harum, and Iron Butterfly. Of course, the Moody Blues before they got way too popish. Procol Harum, just a wonderful band, underrated. Robin Trower and all that. When you have a full, long, 18-minute song like Inagata Vita, you can't get more psychedelic than that. Vanilla Fudge, the pioneers in psychedelic music in many ways because of the Hammond organ and just so many textures going on. So I'm picking Vanilla Fudge as number 5 on the outside looking in. The Doors are more in a league of their own, if that makes sense, and that's a compliment. But anyway, while Pink Floyd, Moody Blues, Procol Harum, and Iron Butterfly and Vanilla Fudge we think of as classic rock, Pink Floyd's the one in there the most that exhumes classic rock, along with the Doors. But the Doors, the Pink Floyd's more acid rock and psychedelic than the Doors to me are. The Doors have moments of psychedelic, but not enough. So the Doors on the outside are not included as Big 5. All right, next, for you black metal fans, I'm not a big fan, but I talk to people. I have friends who love black metal. And the consensus that I've gotten is that the Big 4 of black metal, and from some online research, and I've heard much of the stuff here, just really not my cup of tea. I like the guitar playing a lot, but not so much the vocals. The Big 4, many will argue, are Mayhem, Burzum, Dark Throne, and Emperor. And then on the outside looking in is Bathory and Gorgoroth, because I do like quite a bit of Bathory, although the vocals for me, some of it, not all of it, some of it I struggle with, especially that first album, I think, where it's very raw and unpolished. And I like the music. I'm going to replace Burzum with Bathory. And so Burzum and Gorgoroth are now the two competing for who's the big five, I'm going to make Gorgoroth number 5 as the big 5, and Burzum would be 6. So there you have it for black metal. Let's talk about the first wave of Funeral Doom. Pentagram, St. Vitus, Trouble, and Candlemass would be the ones that I include, and I like all 4 of those bands, although at times Candlemass I can't take seriously because sometimes the vocals it's just cringy or laughable. It's hard to take serious, and it's hard to explain why. So let's talk about death metal. Some of these bands have a little bit of a grindcore to them, but mostly they're labeled as death metal, early death metal, I should say. So here we go. Carcass, Cannibal Corpse, Morbid Angel, and Deicide. I'm not a big fan of these bands at all, but again, I have friends who love these bands. I had a really good friend back in the 90s who loved all these bands, and he would argue that Carcass, Cannibal Corpse, Morbid Angel, and Deicide are the big 4, because I remember him saying that. And then on the outside looking in is Napalm Death, which is death metal / grindcore, and then Obituary. I would put Obituary in there. Okay, post-punk. Joy Division / New Order. Not a big post-punk person, so for those of you who are post-punk fans, these are the big 4, I think. The Cure, Bauhaus, and Television. I do like Television, actually. That first album, Marquee Moon, is wonderful. Kind of inspirational, I think, for James Hall, Who Comes Later. Very television-y sounding in his first 2 albums, if you will. Now, the next one is mostly labeled as alternative rock, but some of these bands have a little bit to do with noise rock, but not super noisy rock. So, and I like these bands quite a bit. Well, one of them I only like 2 or 3 albums, and let's start with them. The band Sonic Youth. Not a big fan. I just when Thurston Moore sings, I just can't. It doesn't do much for me. When Kim Gordon sings, it's okay. The tuning of Thurston Moore's guitar, not my cup of tea. A lot of it sounds clanky in a bad way, and it just kind of, a lot of songs sound the same with that clunk, 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 clunk. So, the Pixies, so Sonic Youth, the Pixies, Jesus and Mary Chain, and Dinosaur Jr., I would say, are the big 4. On the outside looking in is My Bloody Valentine and Big Black. And I have to go with My Bloody Valentine, because when I used to listen to them, I listened to them much more than I ever did Big Black. Although I still like those 2 bands, I just not compelled much to listen to them anymore. Now let's talk about noise rock. Noise rock, really heavy hitting, very noisy. Now, let me give 3 of them, and then I'll give the 4. And these 4 bands are hard to label. Noise rock doesn't do them justice. Avant-garde would be better. Well, the Melvins, there's one, not very avant-garde, just kind of they're kind of, proto-doom, sludge, but noise. Okay, so the Melvins is one. The next is Neuroses. They started off as a punk band, but I do like where they get very avant-garde-ish, and, In Silver and Blood is very good. That's their magnum opus. ISIS, you have Panopticon, and there's another one that can't remember. There's 3 albums I like by them. There's some other stuff. Some of it I don't like at all. And then finally, Swans. Those are the big 4 for me for noise rock. Melvin, Swans, Neuroses, and ISIS. I've gone on record saying many times on this channel that I love Swans, one of my favorite bands of all time, probably top 50 somewhere. They're usually described as no wave, but their early stuff would be definitely noise rock, very akin to, has kind of a Godflesh sound, some of their early stuff, but not exactly Godflesh. So again, the big 4 for me for noise rock would be Melvin, Swans, Neuroses, and ISIS. Finally, we get to industrial. The big 4 for me are 9 Inch Nails, Ministry, Skinny Puppy, KMFDM. I'm not a big KMDFM fan. I like a couple songs, but I have to go with the consensus. I think that from the research and people talking that those, I would agree with that from the popularity. Those are the big four. Used to work in sales, so some of this is coming from that as well. Especially we saw of the post-punk stuff that we saw, the most that we saw were Joy Division, The Cure, Bauhaus. Television not so much, but because I'm a television fan, I'm putting them as the big four. Industrial, we sold a lot of Nine Inch Nails, of course, Ministry, Skinny Puppy, and KMDFM. We always had that in stock. And when it ran out, we'd get it very soon. On the outside looking in, two bands I really like, Fear Factory and Godflesh. This is not a tough call to make. I love Godflesh's early stuff. The new album's okay. Most recent, I think Godflesh is the fifth band on the outside looking in. So there you have it. This is about 25 or 26 different genres or movements where we have who are the big four and who's number 5 on the outside looking in. That would make up what we would call the big 5. Thank you so much for watching. Please consider hitting the like, subscribe, and notification buttons if you're so inclined. Thanks again for watching. Take care now. God bless. Bye.